resources to better address break-and-enters in the city, which has been identified as a consistent concern for our citizens. An average 23 break-and-enters occur in Calgary every day. 8 of these are residential break-and-enters. For the first 3 quarters of this year, citywide break-and-enters were up 39% from the 5-year average. Break-and-enters are also increasingly being linked to stolen vehicles and drug crime throughout the city, creating the need to refocus our resources. Over the past 6 months, the police service has responded by creating 2 centralized break-and-enter teams, which solely investigate commercial and residential break-and-enters in the city of Calgary. By establishing these teams, members are able to work more efficiently to detect cases that may connect identity of the suspects or groups of prolific offenders and recover stolen property. Since creation, the CPS break-and-enter teams have worked approximately 272 files and laid over 600 criminal charges and recovered nearly $850,000 worth of stolen property. Recently, the break-and-enter teams have completed operations targeting parkade and garage break-and-enters, residential break-and-enters, and recovering stolen property. In half of the city's break-and-enters, offenders were able to gain access to a residence without applying any force at all. Citizens are reminded to always remove garage door openers from your vehicles parked near your residence. Offenders will often target vehicles that have openers in them to gain access to the residence. Secure all your windows and doors, even if you are home. Keep your car keys in an unlikely place, not right beside your door for thieves to easily find. Keep irreplaceable documents, photos, and items in an unlikely place. Get to know your neighbors. Report any suspicious people or activity to police immediately by calling 266-1234 or 911 for any kind of crime in progress. Never leave keys in an unattended vehicle, especially while warming up vehicles in cold weather. I can take any questions you might have around what we've been doing.
Especially because we see a lot of these crimes come from out of opportunity where they might wait for someone to leave their car unlocked, especially someone running into a store or something like that, or with a vehicle or the garage, the parkades. How many of these crimes would you say are preventable?
Well, we're seeing a large number of like 50% range of incidents where homes are unlocked, vehicles are unlocked, and obviously that just makes it that much easier for people to access your vehicle or access your home.
Inspector, have you noticed a sharp incline, or has it been a slow, steady increase in the number of break-ins, both commercial and residential?
So in 2015 and 2016, we saw a dramatic increase in the number of break-and-enters in those two years, and that was partly what really brought it to our attention as well. Is the focus on recognizing that we saw such a dramatic increase in such a short period of time, and ultimately allowed us to allocate our resources in order to more effectively address it.
Can you address this to or attribute it to a steady decline in the economy, or is it just more opportunity, or just what do you attribute that to?
You know, it's really difficult to say that it's one thing or another. Clearly there is a change in our economy, but there's also changes in the types of drugs that we're starting to see in Calgary. We're seeing things like methamphetamine, the numbers around methamphetamine increasing, as well as heroin and other drugs. And we are seeing a connection in this type of crime, what we call acquisitive crime, in relation to this type of crime and drug offenses and drug type of activity.
And would this be more individuals, or would it be kind of a group organized activity?
Certainly smaller groups of individuals, sometimes just individuals themselves. You know, they're not all interconnected with one another necessarily, but the specific groups will be ultimately feeding the drug habit or whatever it is that they're using the profits from the break and enters for.
With the increase, have there been one area of the city that's been most affected by these break-ins?
You know, you'd think that would be the case, but that we're not seeing that. We're seeing break and enters really. When you look at a map of where the break and enters are occurring, the break and enters are occurring across our city in all communities. So that's why I think the message is so important for people to recognize that it is happening likely in their community as well, and to be part of that solution by helping us by ensuring they don't leave their cars running with their doors unlocked, ensuring that they lock their detached garages and their homes when they're not at home.
How do you just kind of touch on that, what you said before, if you're looking at about 50% of these are unlocked vehicles or unlocked homes? It seems like a really high amount of otherwise what would be preventable occurrences. I mean, how do you, obviously there's probably media reach out, and I know there was the operation recently,
right,
Jumpstart, where they went out and they educated people about not leaving their, but I mean, how do you combat that to try to see 50% go way down?
Yeah, I think really, I mean, public awareness, I think we all typically feel that we live in a safe city, and public awareness around this, that it is, our own actions are impacting ultimately what ends up happening around some enforcement. I mean, you've seen recently in the news incidents that were highly dynamic situations for the police to deal with around stolen motor vehicles, those kind of things. So it's endangering everybody, the police, the community, those incidents, especially when you mix drugs into all of that, highly dynamic, dangerous situations. So, recognizing that you have a role to play as a member of the public, that you can help us. Enforcement alone with policing cannot solve this problem. All of our citizens need to take some sort of steps to ensure that they're doing what they can to prevent this. And I think there's also an important piece too around the education and preventative work that we're doing as well in the Calgary Police Service. It's not just about the enforcement that is done around these issues. There's also education and prevention that gets done through our community, with our community groups around addictions and the recidivism that we see with these offenders. So part of what we did with this break and enter realignment with our break and enter teams was we also looked at a prolific offender engagement team, and that was an extremely important piece as well, because we know that there's a lot of these people that they go through the system, they go into court, they go to jail, or in some cases don't, and they immediately are back out doing this again. So that recidivism that we see over and over again, how do we address that? So that's where we looked at our prolific offender engagement team. So we have another group now that is focusing not only on the enforcement piece, but they're also focusing on those offenders that continue to go through the system over and over and over again. We all know, I think intuitively, that the vast majority of people are good people, and there's a very small percentage of people that are creating most of the crime within our community. So by focusing more effectively on the prolific offender, we ultimately will help drive the crime rate down.
With the two teams, is there one specifically focused on residential, one on commercial, or what's the sort of the difference? No,
they both work on whatever is the current trend. So really, it's about identifying who are the individuals that are creating the most concern. As you can imagine, if you've got somebody who's very prolific, and we know when they are released or they're out in the community, they're going to commit a large number of break and enters. That has a big impact. So whether it's residential or commercial, ultimately that team, the investigative team from the break and enter teams, will focus their attention on those most prolific offenders.
And with the almost $850,000 in recovered property, how does that compare to years past, and can you accredit that number to the success of these teams?
Yeah, certainly. I don't have the exact stats. I just can say that, this is highly effective work that's being done. When we had our teams before, we had the same number of investigators, but we had them spread out in all our district offices before. And now what we've done is we've coordinated them more effectively to work together, because we saw a couple things were occurring, right? The offenders themselves weren't stuck to one area. They were committing crimes across the city, yet our investigators were in one area of the city within the district. So this allows them to be more effective. And then combining that with the idea that if you have a highly prolific person, you may need more than a couple investigators to work on that person. By combining the teams together, we now can put the resources we need to focus more effectively on those most prolific people.
So same number of investigators, just a restructuring.
It's just a restructuring, exactly. Essentially, you know, there's, like all areas of our society, you know, the police services, we're not in a growth situation. So it's you know, we looked at how can we be more effective and efficient with the resources we have already, and this is part of it. This was the restructuring of our centralized break and enter teams.
And what do you make of the numbers, you know, going in before these teams were established? Did you think that it was going to be like this many charges, this much stolen property?
I'm absolutely astonished, to be honest with you, at how incredibly effective this has been for us by bringing these people together. The results have been very positive, and what we're seeing now is we're seeing a downward trend in the number of break and enters that are occurring. So it wasn't just these teams, it was a whole bunch of other stuff we did as a police organization. Of course, we have something called our real-time operations center, which operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So by combining the effectiveness of how we can better resource this type of crime with our real-time operations center, and ultimately focusing on these types of offenders with our break and enter teams, we've been more effective. And it really has been a very positive result. Certainly seeing a downward, when you've seen the graph go up so dramatically over the last couple of years, and then by bringing all these resources together, it actually has had an impact, and we're seeing a downward trend. Like in October, break and enters were down by 50% from what they were in 2015. So substantial effective work being done there. I certainly can't say that it's, you know, all one area. It's a combination of everything that we've done together.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just wondering, in the opening there, we discussed like your personal items, keep them in an unlikely place, and we saw some of the items that have been recovered, everything from bicycles stolen to the electronics equipment, sports equipment. Just to go from more general to a little bit more specific, if you could, I mean, can you give a couple of examples of some of the cases and some of the items perhaps that have really stood out to you, and perhaps maybe give some examples of like some really, you know, really heartbreaking cases, like some of the examples of things that have been stolen from certain families? Can you give any more specific examples of things that have stood out to you? I
don't have anything specific that I can just bring forward right now, certainly for you, but I can say that, you know, the ease at which in some cases offenders are able to effectively enter a home. If you leave your car unlocked on the street and somebody accesses, and you have an attached garage to your home, and somebody accesses your garage, your vehicle, and hits the garage door remote, they now have access into your home. Many people do not lock their interior door going into their home. So we've seen nighttime break and enters occurring where they're utilizing a car remote to now access your home, making very little noise. You know, some of these new garage door openers now are pretty quiet. So you can just imagine the impact that has on you as a family, knowing somebody's been in your home at night while you were sleeping. You know, it's highly dangerous. It's highly concerning for people. And so, you know, this is why we're trying to bring this to the attention of everybody, to realize that these little things like this could ultimately impact your safety and help us help you by securing your stuff at night.
If you're finding that a lot of the same people are doing these crimes, is there a chance that you could go to the Crown that when you get these guys, you ask that they be held, because normally a judge would let a guy out on a B&E, right?
It's a very good point you're bringing up, and I think one of the things that I can mention is that we now have a dedicated Crown working with our break and enter team, so that's new. We didn't do that before, so we went to our Crown Prosecutor's Office and said, this is a prolific issue, break and enters are going up, what can we do together to be more efficient in dealing with this. And we were assigned a member of the Crown's office to work specifically with our break-and-enter teams to ensure our investigations are as best they can be, a very good quality investigation. And ultimately, when we're trying to put conditions on these offenders, we know exactly what the Crown is looking for in order for them to be able to hold people or send them for mandatory treatment or whatever it is that we can do to help break that recidivism that we see with these same offenders over and over again.
Is there, when these individuals steal the property, do they sell it on their own, or are there is there higher up in the organization where this material goes to, and can you get at these other people?
It is certainly shared amongst, so in some cases individuals are sharing it on their own, other times they're selling it to other people within their own little group of drug addicted people or whatever it is that they're utilizing the profits for. But what we're seeing a lot is also the use of social media to sell the stolen property. So this is an important piece, right? We all know that there's social media available out there that allows you to sell your personal items on different social media sites. So that is one way that individuals can reap the profit and benefit from the work or from the break-and-enters and car thefts and so forth that they're committing.
Inspector, without trying to be alarmist or anything, what percentage of these B&Es occur with people at home?
It would be a smaller percentage that are occurring when people are at home. Typically, individuals that are breaking into homes don't want to have a confrontation with somebody in a home, obviously, but we do see a trend, and when you of them occurring where we have had some nighttime break-and-enters occurring, that's a major concern to us. And you know, I think it's important